Hi friends, welcome to Azure Content. This is part 20 in Azure Data Factory Real-Time Scenarios playlist. In this video, we are going to learn how to sort an array using Azure Data Factory Pipelines. So let's see our requirement in details. So we have few input arrays as you can see on screen. So the first array is 3, 2, 1, 4 and our requirement is to sort this array in ascending order and the output array should look like this. The output array should be 1, 2, 3, 4. And in similar way, if we pass string values in the array, for example, D, B, A, C, then the pipeline should be good enough to give the output as A, B, C, D. That is in ascending order of the alphabets. So in part 18 and 19, we have learned how to swap the array and how to reverse an array using ADF pipeline. And in this video, we are going to sort the array. Majorly, these operations are performed programmatically using some language like C++, Java or Python. And using ADF, it will require more effort and patience as well as time to achieve these kind of scenarios while dealing with any kind of array operations. And even in ADF, we have some other alternate solutions that is more easier way to achieve these kind of requirements. For example, if I go to data flow within ADF, let me show you. In data flow, if I add some source, I'm just adding some dummy source and I'm adding a derived column transformation. And here in the expression, I'm trying to search for sort function. So you can see that this sort function is available that is supposed to do the same job. It is going to sort the elements present in the array in ascending order. Okay, so it can be achievable in a single step using derived column transformation. But still, sometimes in some projects, we have restrictions to use data flow due to its high cost. So I'm going to try my hands on creating the pipeline in ADF directly that will be supposed to sort the array. And the disclaimer for this video is that you can skip this video because I'm going to talk about the alternate solutions to achieve this requirement anyways in the upcoming videos. So if you have patience and time, then only invest your time in this video. So before directly jumping into creation of ADF pipeline, let me talk you through the steps that we are going to follow in order to achieve the requirement. Okay. So first of all, we are going to create a variable called input array that will hold the variable that you will pass during the runtime that you want to sort. Okay. So suppose this is the array, that is the same array we have in the presentation. Okay. So 3, 2, 1, 4. Now this is the only information that we have as the input. Okay. So out of this information, what other information we can extract is we can get the length of this array. Okay. So length of the array is 4. Okay. So we will try to fetch the length. Okay. And then we are going to find the indexes of each of the elements of the array. So let me name this variable that we are going to create as iteration because that's what we are going to iterate through. So in order to determine the indices of the array, we can use range function. Okay, we have already used this function in the previous video. So please go through that video in order to understand how this function works. So if we give 0, 4, its output will be 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, starting from 0, that is the first argument or the first element in range function, it will give us 4 consecutive elements starting from 0. Okay. So in the range function, the first element will be hard-coded, that is 0. So starting from 0, the indices will start, but the number of elements will be decided on the basis of length of this input array. Okay, so this one will not be hard-coded. It will be basically length of input array. Okay. But for this requirement, we are not going to iterate till the length of input array. Instead, we are going to iterate till length -1. I'm going to tell you the reason later. Okay, in some time. So we are going to iterate till 0, 1, 2. Okay, till second element. That is till this point only. So I'm going to tell you the reason behind it in just a moment. Okay, so our iteration would be 0, 1, 2. Okay. So now what we are going to do is we are going to use an until activity and we are going to have some set of activities within this until block. So until when we are going to perform those activities is until the length of this iteration array becomes 0. Okay. So basically, until this iteration array becomes empty, till that point we are going to loop through the until block and we are going to perform all the activities present within the until block. And once this iteration array becomes empty, this loop will end and it will come out of the until block. Okay, so as I said, the condition will be that the iteration array would be empty. Okay, so let me just write it in layman term. So of course, by knowing this condition, you can predict that inside this until block, we are going to reframe the iteration and we are going to reduce the number of elements in the iteration in each of the instance within this until block. Okay, so that part will come later. But inside this until block, the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to get the current index. Okay, so we are going to get the current index as iteration of 0. Okay, and similarly we are going to get the next index value as iteration of 0 plus 1. Okay, so iteration of 0 is nothing but 0 in the first instance, and we are going to add 1 on top of it to get the next index that will give us 1. At this point, you may think that we can also take iteration of 1 for that matter, because anyways it will give 1. Basically, when we will reframe this iteration array and we will reduce the number of elements here, then at some point of time it will only have 1 element. And if we take the next index as iteration of 1, at that point it will fail. Okay, so we are just going to take iteration of 0 plus 1. That will give us some integer value. Okay. And now coming to why we are taking length of input array minus 1 here to frame the iteration array is because when we will be at this point, that is the third element, we will be determining the fourth element by using this next index. Okay, so basically there is no need to iterate till last element. We just need to iterate till last minus 1 element. Okay, so hope we are clear till this point. So for the first iteration, current index will be iteration of 0, that will be 0. Okay, so suppose this is the first iteration we are talking about and this gives us 0, and of course this will give us 1. Okay, now the next step is to compare the elements present in the current index and the next index. So the current index element is 3, as iteration array will give us 0 for the current index, and at the 0th position we have 3. Okay, so this will be 3, and the element at the next index will be 2, right? So we will basically compare between these two. If 3 is greater than 2, then we will perform certain kind of activities. If 3 is not greater than 2, then we will perform certain other kind of activities. So in order to compare the elements at current index and next index, we need to use if block. So in the first iteration, our current index is nothing but 0 and the next index is 1. And if you can see, element at 0th position is 3. So let me write down here, current element is 3 and the next element, that is the element at next index, is nothing but element at first position, that is 2. Okay, so the comparison will happen between 3 and 2 and we will compare. If 3 is greater than 2, then it will go inside true block. Okay, so here, since our motto is to sort the array in the ascending order, so if this element is greater than the next element, then we are simply swapping these two elements. Okay, so we have already covered in part 18 of this playlist that how to swap the elements of an array using ADF pipeline. Please go through that video before moving forward with this video to understand it well, how to swap the elements of an array. Okay, so here in the true block, if 3 is greater than 2, then we will simply use swap logic to swap the elements and it will result in 2, 3 instead of 3, 2. So the input array will be updated by this value. And once the elements are swapped, we are just going to reset this iteration array to the value that was at the beginning. Okay, so once this is done, it will come out of the if block, but it will still be inside this until block, because the condition of coming out of the until block is that iteration array should become null, that is empty. So we are again inside this until block and we will check the current index, that is iteration 0 is nothing but 0 and next index is 1, but the current element at 0th position is changed. As you can see, the elements are swapped, so the current element is 2 and the next element, that is at first position, is 3. Okay, so now the comparison will happen between 2 and 3, not 3 and 2. So we will check if 2 is greater than 3. So since 2 is not greater than 3, it will not fall inside true block. It will go inside false block. Okay, so here in the false block, what we will do is, we don't need to swap the elements. We are just going to change this iteration value. Okay, so here we will change this iteration value by skipping the first element present in the iteration array. So we will use some logic to skip the first value of this iteration array, and it will result in this case, it will result in 1 comma 2. Okay, so we will end up with this value 1 comma 2. So now one element has been reduced from the original iteration array, but still the array is not empty. We have two values present in the iteration array, but the current index and the next index values have been changed. So now the first element in iteration array is 1 and the next index is 1 plus 1, that is 2. Okay, so the element at first position is, here we have 0 and then 1, 2, 3. So the element at first position is this one, that is 3, and the element at second position is this one, that is 4. So now the comparison will happen between 3 and 4. Okay, so let me update the value. So the current element now is 3 and next element is 4. So the comparison will happen between 3 and 4. So in the if block, it will check if 3 is greater than 4. Since 3 is not greater than 4, it will go inside this false condition, and again the iteration array will be updated and the first value will be skipped. Okay, so now the array will look like this. We just have one element, that is 2, but still the array is not empty, so it will still be inside the until block. So now the current index at iteration 0 is 2. So let me update this, and the next index will be 2 plus 1, that is 3, and the current element at second position is nothing but 4, and the next element at third position is 1. So the comparison will happen between 4 and 1. So we will check if 4 is greater than 1, which actually holds true. So it will go inside true block and it will swap these two elements. So here it will be 1 comma 4 instead of 4 comma 1. So the new updated input array is this one. Okay, and now in the true block itself, the iteration array will be reset to the initial value. So now it's no longer having only one value. Let me remove it. The iteration variable holds this value throughout the pipeline level, since the scope of variable lies throughout the pipeline level. So iteration variable is having 0, 1, 2 as the value now. So now it will again come out of if block, but it is still inside the until block. So the loop will continue and execution of each of the activities within until block will restart again, and this time the current index, that is iteration of 0, is 0 again. So let me update this, and next index is 0 plus 1, so it is 1, and the current element, that is the element at 0th position, is 2. So let me update this, and the next element is 3, that is at position 1, it is 3. So the comparison between these two elements will happen. Since 2 is not greater than 3, so it will go inside false condition, and the iteration value will be updated by skipping the first element, that is 0. So again it will be 1 comma 2. So it will come out of this if block, but still it is inside until block since iteration is not empty. So now the current index is 1 and next index is 2, as you can see here, and the current element, that is element at current index, is, as you can see, 0, 1, 2, 3. So we have at first position we have 3 and at second position we have 1 now. So the comparison will happen between 3 and 1. So here it will check if 3 is greater than 1. Since this holds true, so it will swap these two elements and 1 will come before 3, and the input array will be updated to this one. And also the iteration array will be reset to 0, 1, 2, and it will no longer be having only 2 elements. So it will come outside this if block and the loop will continue. So now the current index is nothing but 0 again, and the next index is 0 plus 1, that is 1. And if we see, the element at 0 position is 2 and the element at first position is 1. So the comparison will happen between 2 and 1. Since 2 is greater than 1, it will go inside true block and it will interchange or swap these two elements. So the array will look like this, and the input array will be updated to 1, 2, 3, 4. But the loop will not end here, since the iteration will be updated again to 0, 1, 2. So now the current index is 0 and the next index is 1, and the current element, that is element at current index, is 1 and the next element is 2. So the comparison will happen between 1 and 2. So it will check if 1 is greater than 2. Since it is not holding true, it will go inside false block and it will update the iteration to 1, 2, since it will skip the first element. Okay. So now this will be the iteration value. So the loop will continue again. The current index will be 1 and the next index will be 2. The element at current index, that is element at first position, is 2 and element at next position is 3. So comparison will happen between 2 and 3. Since 2 is greater than 3, this holds false. So it will go inside false condition and it will again change this iteration value and it will skip the first element and the array value will only be 2. So now the loop will continue and the current index is nothing but 2, that is iteration 0, and the next index, that is 2 plus 1, is 3, and the element at third position will be nothing but 0, 1, 2, 3, that is 4. Okay, so the next element value is 4. So the comparison will happen between 3 and 4. So 3 is greater than 4 holds false. So again it will go inside this false block and it will skip the first element from iteration array, and now the array will be empty and now it will come out of this until block and we will land up with this sorted array. So this is what we have to achieve using ADF pipeline. So let me go to Azure portal and here let me start creating the pipeline. First of all, let me create a variable that will hold our input array. So I'm going to set this data type as array. So let me use set variable to do that. Let me rename this set variable as input array, and the value for this input array I want to give during the runtime. So let me create a pipeline parameter with the same name, that is input array, and let me give the type as array, and let me set a default value, that is the same value 3, 2, 1, 4. Okay, let me recheck 3, 2, 1, 4. Yeah. So now let me point this array value as pipeline parameter. So whenever I will be debugging this, I can change this input array value and it will be set in the variable. Okay. And now, as we discussed, we need to create this iteration array which will have this expression. Okay, so let me copy this expression and let me create another set variable activity and let me join these two and let me create a variable named as iteration, and let me make the data type as array again. Let me give the name as iteration for this activity as well, and here we are going to use that expression here. So let me use @ symbol. We have already talked about this range function in the previous video. I am not going much in details. So here, instead of this input array, let me select the variable. So we are good. Let me click on OK and let me hit on debug. So currently this is the input array, that is 3, 2, 1, 4, that we are passing during the runtime. So let's wait for this execution to be completed. Yeah, so it's completed. Let's check. The input array is coming as expected, 3, 2, 1, 4, which was the value provided by us during the runtime. And if I check this iteration output, you can see it is giving 0, 1, 2, which is also expected since we are using length -1 in this range function. So it is not giving 3, it is just giving until 0, 1, 2. Okay. So we are good till this point. Let me go back. So now we have got this iteration value as 0, 1, 2. Now our job is to use this until block, and we have to specify this condition until this iteration value becomes empty. So let me use until activity here, and let me connect these two, and we will simply give this expression as until this variable is empty. So let me select this. So we are good. And inside this until block, we have to set two variables, that is current index and next index. So let me use two set variable here. So let me drag these two. Let me connect. So the first one is current index and the next one is next index. Let me rename it. And we have to create these two variables here in the variable section. First one is current index and next one is next index. Okay. And let the data type of these two variables be string itself. If we would have int as the option here, we could have selected that, but let it be string. So as discussed, the current index will be nothing but iteration of 0. Okay. So let me here select current index and let me give the value as iteration of 0. Okay. And let me convert it to string since the variable data type is string. And let me click on OK. Similarly, in the next index option, let me select next index. And here, let me select this iteration of 0 plus 1, right? As we have mentioned here, next index is nothing but iteration of 0 plus 1. So let me use add function on top of this and let me add 1 here. So this variable is of string data type. Let me convert it to integer in order to perform mathematical operation on top of it. So now it will return integer value. So now again, let me convert it to string since the variable is a string. So we are good. Let me click on OK. And now what we have to do is we have to check for this condition. If current index is greater than the next index, then we will be performing some operations based on the output. So let me go back and let me here use if activity and let me connect these two. And here in the expression, we will check if current index is greater than next index by using greater function. So we have greater function here where we will check if current index is greater than the next index. So this is the expression we will be using. So if this holds true, then we will go inside this true block. And then we have to use the swap logic. So I'm not going deep into the swap logic because it has already been covered in the part 18. So please watch that. I will just implement the same here in the true block and I will explain on a high level. Okay. So let me show you the pipeline that we used for swap array elements in part 18 of this playlist. So let me tell you on a high level what we are exactly doing here. So suppose our array looks like this. Okay, 3, 2, 1 and 4. Okay. And we have to swap between these two elements, that is 2 and 1. So first of all, what we are doing is we are determining the left and right elements. So in this case, the left element is nothing but all the elements coming before the first index and right element is all the elements coming after the second index. And in this case, there is no middle element, but if there would be any middle element, then it would determine the middle elements too. And in the temporary array, we are just creating the array by repositioning these left, right and middle elements. Okay, so our positions will be left element first, and instead of index 1 element, we will use index 2 element first. So it will be 1 and then index 1 element and then right element. Okay, and in case there would be any middle element, suppose the array would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and we have to replace or we have to swap between 2 and 4, then this would be left element, this would be the right element and 3 would be the middle element, and our position will be left, then index 2 and then middle, then index 1 and then right element. So the array would look like left, that is 1, index 2 is nothing but 4, then middle element is 3, then first index element is 2 and right element is 5. So if you see, 2 and 4 have been swapped amongst each other by just repositioning the elements. Okay. So this is what we are going to apply inside this true block of if condition. So let me create set variable activity for left element, then right element. But while sorting the array, we don't need the middle element because every time we are just checking or comparing between current index and the immediate next index. So there would not be any middle index between these two index. Okay. So here let me write it down as left, and this would be the right elements. And similarly, let me first minimize it. Let me create two variables, left and then right. Okay. And the data type will be array for both of the variables. And also we need these temporary array and the swap array, because this is where we have to interchange the positioning of the sequence of these arrays, and this is the final swapped array. So let me create more variables, that is temp array, and this will also be of array type, and swapped array. Okay, swapped array. So let me give it array data type. And now let me go inside the true block, and here in the left, let me select left variable, and in the expression we will use take function. We have already talked about these functions in part 18 while creating the swap array pipeline, so I'm going to use the same. So here out of the input array we are going to take all the elements till current index. Okay, so here let me convert it to int because it is a string variable. So we are good. So this will determine the left element. Similarly, let me use right variable, and here in the value let me use skip function to skip all the elements starting from the first element till the next index. So here let me go to variables, and out of input array we are going to skip all the elements till the next index plus 1. Okay, so let me use add function and let me convert it to integer. So we are good. Let me click on OK. And now let me drag another set variable activity. Let me connect these two activities together. And here let me use temp array. And here we need to create a new array using create array function. And in order to swap the current index and the next index, we need to reposition the elements. First we need to take the left element, then next index, and then current index, and then right element. So let me select left element and then element at index, that is next index. Let me select this, and then let me take input array element at current index and then right element. We are good here, but the only thing is let me convert it to int, because these variables, that is next index and current index, holds the index value in string format. So let me convert it to integer. And on top of this input array, we are using the brackets to determine the index position, okay, for the elements. So we are good with the logic, but as we have done in part 18, we will check if this variable is null or empty. Then we will replace it with blank strings, else we will return this variable. Okay, so let me copy this and we will just check if empty, and let me paste it. If this variable is empty, then we will return this blank string, else we will return the variable itself. Okay, so let me close this. Let me check. I'm missing this parenthesis here. Similarly, we will do the same for right variable. So we will check if empty, and let me close this. And if this is empty, we are going to return the blank string, else we will return the variable itself. Let me close this. So we are good. Let me click on OK. So this will create the temporary array. Let me rename it as temp array. And now let me drag another set variable that will be formatting the output of this temp variable. Okay, so let me give it as swapped array. And here let me select the swapped array variable. So here we just need to write the same logic as we have done in swap array element. where we are just replacing all these unnecessary values, that is double quotes, comma and comma double quotes. Okay. So please go through part 18 to check everything in details. I'm just copying the same and let me paste it here. So done. Let me click on OK. So these set of activities will swap the two elements of current and next index value if current index will be greater than next index. Okay. So as we have discussed, the input array will be updated with this swap array, and also the iteration will be reset inside this true block. Okay. So let me perform the same here. Let me add another set variable activity, and this time here we will just update the input array. Okay. So let me select the input array here and let me pass the value coming from the swapped array into this variable, and let me add another set variable activity, and here let me reset the iteration value. Okay. So we are going to reset it to the same value as it was there at the first place. Okay. So here let me use the same expression as we had, and let me go inside this reset iteration and let me use the same expression here. So we are good. Let me click on OK and let me go to the false condition. Here what we have to do is we just need to update the iteration value by skipping the first element of the iteration array. So let me use set variable activity to update the iteration. So here we need to skip the first element from the iteration array. Okay. So to do that, let me use skip function and we will skip from iteration variable. We will skip the first element. Okay. But it says the expression cannot self-reference variable. A variable cannot be referenced itself in the expression. So let me copy this. Let me cut it and let me use another set variable activity and let me create a temporary iteration. Let me create a variable with the same name, temp iteration, and let me give it as array data type. Let me go again to the false block, and here I will use this temp iteration to skip the first element, and then I will set the same value into the iteration. Okay, so here let me go to the temp iteration and let me click on OK. So this is the place where it is actually shortening the length of iteration array, and eventually it will come to 0 and it will go out of the until block. So once it will come out of the loop, the input array variable will hold the sorted array. So to fetch the value of input array, let me use another set variable activity outside this until block, and let me give the name as final sorted array, and let me create the variable with the same name, and the data type will be array, and here let me select the final sorted array and let me reference the input variable here. So now our pipeline is completed. Let me hit on debug and the input array is 3214. Let me click on OK. So the execution has started. So you can see input array is 3214 and we are expecting the output will be 1234. So here the iteration is 0, 1, 2 and the current index at the first run is 0 and next index is 1. Let's wait for another activities to be completed. So in the if condition, it is checking if the current index value, that is the value at 0 position, that is 3, is greater than 2, then it should swap the elements in the array. But here it is not calling the true condition activities, that is left, right and temp array. It is only going into the false. As you can see, this temp iteration is being called, that is reducing the value of iteration array, but it is not going into the true block. So let me check inside the if condition what is wrong. So here we are actually checking the value of current index and next index. Okay, so we are checking if current index is greater than next index, but we actually need to check the elements present at this current index and elements present in the next index. So we are comparing these two values, but instead we need to compare the elements values. Okay, so for that, let me go to the variables, and here let me select input array and let me give brackets. And similarly here, let me select input array and these are the index. So here let me give bracket and it should be an integer value. So let me give int function. Similarly here, let me give int function to convert string into integer, and we are good. Okay, so now it will compare the element present at current index and element present at next index in the input array instead of just comparing the index values. Okay, so now let me hit on debug and we are using the same values 3, 2, 1, 4. Let's wait. So the pipeline is executing. Let's check the output. So first the input array is set to 3, 2, 1, 4, which is fine. And the iteration is 0, 1, 2, which is also as expected. The current index is 0 and the next index should be 1. Let's check. The next index is 1. That means the elements that needs to be compared are 3 and 2, right? So you can see 3 is greater than 2, so it went into the true block and it determined the left element, that is null, because before 3 there is no elements, and the right element is 1, 4, which is fine, and the temp array is 2, 3, 1, 4. So you can see 3, 2 has been swapped amongst each other. And let me check. So here the swapped array is coming in the formatted array, which is 2, 3, 1, 4. So we are good. And the input array has been updated with the same value. Then we are still inside the true block. So iteration has been reset to 0, 1, 2. And now the loop continues again and the current index is checked 0 and 1. But this time it did not go into the true block since 2 is not greater than 3. So it updated the temp iteration and reduced it by 1 element. Okay, so the loop is continuing again with the current index as 1 and next index as 2. And similarly, it is swapping the elements, and if the current element is greater than next element. Okay, so finally we are getting the final sorted array. Let me check. So you can see the final sorted array is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the expected value. So we have achieved it using the ADF pipeline. Let me debug it again with the new value as we have in the presentation, DBAC. Okay, so let me give the value in the string format inside array as D, then B, B, then A, and C. So we are expecting the output should be A, B, C, D. So pipeline is still executing. Let's check the iteration value. So now it is empty. So it should be finished within no time. So you can see pipeline execution is finished. Let's check the array. So you can see final sorted array is giving us output as A, B, C, D, which is the expected value. So now if your requirement is to sort in descending order, then you can simply use the reverse array mechanism that we have created in the last video, that is part 19. So please check that as well. And once the array is sorted, you can call this reverse array pipeline, which will take this as the input and give the reversed value as the output. In that way, it will be sorted in descending order. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you like the content. Please hit on like button and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you.